Welcome to Let's Talk, hosted by David B Plemons, CPA Inc. Here, we will focus on the struggle, the juggle, and everyday hustle of small business. We will be here weekly talking to small business owners about their everyday struggles. We welcome your questions and comments, so feel free to email us at admin@plemonscpa.com. We hope you enjoy, and above all, we hope it helps.
All right, so in the last episode, we were talking about how it's important for a business to basically start and create their own supporting cast of members. And in the previous episode with Chris Hall here, he was talking about how you want to get a football team basically built for you and you as the owner of the business, but at the same time, you also may have to play the role as the quarterback at times. Would you say that's correct?
Sure. It's having those separate roles. If you imagine two overlapping circles. Working in your business, you have to serve as a quarterback because you direct all those different pieces, those components. So when you have to implement, you're responsible for getting the ball across the goal line. However, working on your business as a business owner, making sure your business is set up properly, you're more stuck up in the skybox, like I was mentioning, kind of having to watch everything, but still very, very, dependent on everyone actively managing their role.
Okay. And we also talked about, like we were talking about before, the quarterback. The coach is another person, the offensive line, the fullback, and the tailback. And we'll also go through more in-depth examples throughout this podcast of who they are, what you would need them for, because sometimes in a game you may have a standout player in one position that wouldn't necessarily do it every week, but when you need them to perform, you would want them to be at their, peak condition.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So it's always fun to hear about franchise quarterbacks, and you never see a franchise wide receiver or a franchise center. So teams are built around certain components for a reason, because you rely on that component to be at least very close to flawless, if not flawless all the time. They need to do their job all the time. So, and then focusing on those other items are intermittently more important than, as a whole over the game.
Okay. So are there a few positions that you would say stand out, or the core people that you would build your business around, like maybe a coach, or a quarterback or something like that?
Sure. You can look no further than our recent Super Bowl champions. So, you got Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. Neither one are probably amazing at their job, but their ability to work well together is paramount. So you look at Tom Brady, who's been called, and I know a lot of people out there, including myself, are not necessarily blown away or really big fans of them per se, but it's you can't argue with their ability to be a successful core nucleus of professionals. So in doing their job well, those two components are probably the most important. As far as the owner of the business, unfortunately, most of the time that they are kind of they're a spectator in the regard of they are very important, and you need to know exactly what they want to do, and obviously they want to win. But unfortunately, from a management standpoint, they need to make sure that everyone's doing what they get paid to do. So, and that's kind of their responsibility.
Could we go more in detail then, if you will, with the quarterback position as them being the CPA that would work with you? Could you give a scenario of why you would need them and basically their importance in the whole grand scheme of things?
Sure. Quarterbacks have an interesting job description where they have to not only be able to throw a ball, which is kind of what you think of as a quarterback whenever you're younger. So, and then whenever you play football, it becomes so much more that you have to do. You have to be able to react constantly. You have to be able to react to things that you have no control over. So when a business owner comes to you and says, I have X, Y, Z problem, whatever that may be, maybe it's a shortfall in cash flow. So those professionals need to be able to react to that situation and say, we need to audible, we need to do this, we need to utilize this opportunity here with this wide receiver that's wide open every time. So if there's an opportunity to be able to utilize those different aspects of the team, then they need to be able to recognize that proactively. So most business owners especially, only give their CPAs the information whenever it's time to fill out the tax returns and do the taxes for the previous year. And by that time, that ship has sailed. So, but if you give the quarterback the information that they need to make the play before they actually hike the ball, then you're much better off at increasing your success rate to get to that touchdown and ultimately to winning the game. So, and that coach is, it is important as well. That coach being able to watch everything and see everything going on the field has a better viewpoint sometimes for different components than, say, a quarterback having only two eyes, being able to focus on only one particular area of the field. So both are very important, and it's very important that they're on the same page.
Okay. When you're saying that you'd rather give your CPA information throughout the year so they know exactly, what's going on, they're not hit with something like with a blind side of a big problem at the very end of the year, would you compare that to them potentially watching film before they're to face their next opponent so they have a better understanding of what to expect, even though you may not be able to get a hold of everything?
Absolutely. There are different things that you become accustomed to seeing as a CPA and a financial planner. Now, I never like to tell different professionals how to run their lives, but having a more proactive approach has been very beneficial from what I've seen for CPAs. So having that information, being able to see that play unfolding in their head and knowing statistically what is going to happen over the long run. So if you ask the CPA most questions, they're going to have within a range similar to financial planners. They'll know within a range, a statistical range, what the probability of what's going to happen is going to be. So if you say that your business is in a particular sector and you're doing A, B, and C, then they can probably forecast within a pretty decent range of where it's going to end up. So if you're doing these components, they can increase the probability of success.
Okay.
So
we were talking in the last episode about how a tailback would be very adaptable to a situation, whether they have to run the ball, be a wide receiver at times, or be an additional blocker if the quarterback were to throw the ball. How important do you think it would be for a quarterback to have to be able to be adaptable and being able to change stuff up now? Because we've seen in the recent years of the NFL that there's a lot of quarterbacks that run now, sometimes like Russell Wilson, RG3 back when he was in his prime. Do you think that would be important for a CPA to be able to do multiple things as well, whether it's personal or business related?
That's a great question. If you look at, so that's a great example of RG3 or Russell Wilson or the quarterback for Houston Texans. Sorry.
Deshaun
Watson. Great athletes. And they are one of the biggest run threats that you have to deal with as quarterbacks. However, you'll hear commentators talk about it all the time. You're running into an area of increasingly substantial danger. So that position of substantial danger that they're running into, they put themselves at greater risk. So I always have concerns whenever one position is trying to do multiple items. So if you went to your quarterback and said, I'm going to need you to run the ball 60% of the time, it's very risky because you have somebody that is not trained in the capacity to run the ball beyond the pocket. So for that reason, you want them to be able to focus on what they're supposed to do, which is read the defense, react to what's going on, and lead the team. So rely on those people. But in an emergency, absolutely, they are important. You'll hear a lot of commentators comment on that specifically is these young quarterbacks are not going to be able to survive very long if they don't learn how to, stay in the pocket.
Absolutely.
So, Deshaun Watson had a punctured lung and broken collarbone, I think, or a broken rib, and he had to be carted to Florida in a bus to be with the team last season. So it's dangerous to put somebody out there running like that. And that was probably a little bit further into that example than I needed to go. So
it shows how important that is, though, and it also shows not to overstep your boundaries and stick basically with what you know best, unless there's a dire need for it or a very rare instance in which it's necessary.
We've seen prime examples of that both in football and in business. So in business, you see a lot of business owners that have put something in place or they bought a specific product at a specific time for a specific reason, and now that product no longer serves its purpose. So, or they tried to get, to use an old saying, a square peg into a round hole. It just doesn't work. So being able to use those professionals for what they are supposed to be used for saves a lot of time and a lot of money. So whereas asking an accountant to look up something from a legal standpoint, you probably wouldn't want to do that because it'll take them a lot of more time to do so. Whereas they could just refer you to the attorney. The attorney could answer the question in 15 minutes, where the accountant's going to bill you for 6 hours.
So now that we've gone through the quarterback, the next one I'd like to go through is the coach, which is the financial planner. Can you give me a scenario in which they would be important personally as well as in a business standpoint?
The coach is probably the most or the least appealing component of a team. They get the brunt of the blame whenever something happens. I think we had 6 coaches fired just in the last part of the season last year. So when they get the brunt of the blame, and they get very little of the praise whenever the team does well. So, but they're an important role. They have to be able to see what's coming down the line with not the next team that they're going to play, but the next 3-5 games. Who's going to be the big concern on the horizon? And they can't afford to just look at everything one game at a time. They have to play like they're going to be in the Super Bowl constantly. So they have to decide whether or not they're going to, and to go back to the football analogy, whether or not they're going to sit a player that they know is probably going to allow them to win a game because they're worried about what's going to happen in the playoffs. So if their quarterback or if their wide receiver, their star player has an injury, they have to make that decision, and they need to be able to see that developing, whether or not it's actually going to come to fruition or not. So that coach really needs to be able to view the game in a larger scale, not just on the field, but what's going on 3 months down the line, 3 years down the line, 30 years down the line, whenever it comes to a business owner. So, and although you can't read the future, no one can, it's important to be able to plan for those potential outcomes, develop contingencies, and identify what the options are going to be whenever you get there. The primary shortcoming I see most of the time is that business owners work so long and so hard to climb this ladder, and then they get out to year 20 or year 25, and they find out that ladder has been leaning against the wrong wall. And it's developed into something that they didn't necessarily see, and sometimes that's good, but a lot of time that's not ideal to what they wanted.
So the coach is essentially, or the financial planner too, it would be like an unsung hero basically. And from what I'm hearing, you're saying that they have to prepare for the next game, the next few games this season, and in a business aspect, maybe a few decades down the road as well. But if a coach would have to make like halftime adjustments, is it also important to have the short-term goals, a few weeks or a few months from now, where do you want to be with your business, as well as what you want to be down the road in a few decades?
It's an interesting question. So eventually your long-term goal becomes short-term goals. So the short-term is the most important, making sure that you can survive long enough to get to the long-term goals. So and you train for all these different situations as a coach coaching a team. They know exactly what the outcomes are, and let's just say that you had play A, B, and C. So if the defense makes a shift and you want to capitalize on the opportunity, or something that you're doing is not working, you already have your team, you already have those contingency plans in place. So it's a simple shift from a financial planning standpoint, as long as the upfront work was done. Because your option C, you just say, hey guys, this isn't where option A is not working, we're switching to option C. But your option C, your team doesn't know any different. It's just they're switching methods of whatever they're doing. So if, for instance, we have, let's say with a business owner where their sales are down, so that's whenever you would call the proper professional and say, our sales are down, we need to be able to make payroll. What options do we have? Well, we either tap reserves or we go to the bank and get a loan. What is the outcome? What does it look like if we do that 5 years from now? If we go get a loan and we're paying that back for 5 years, how's that going to impact our bottom line? So if we have changes in insurance or changes in retirement plan or changes in the tax code, how's that going to impact everything moving forward if we make this adjustment? So what financial planners really try to do, that's the most important, and I love how you said we were unsung heroes. I try to be as humble as possible, but I'll take that label. That's pretty good. That's a pretty good label. But a good financial planner is comfortable playing second fiddle. So knowing that they are not the most important part, that they are kind of the grand scheme person. They are a very important part, but if we can't get a client to take action, our job is for naught. We haven't done anything. We've failed our clients. So in CPAs, clients don't really have an option. They're going to pay taxes. So a CPA can get a client to take action, but a financial planner really needs to be able to see the grand scheme of things and be able to get that client to move in that proper direction.
So like a motivational thing that the head coach, they want to get the players to do what they want. But with the financial planner, you're not, forcing somebody to do something, but you're more of like a suggestive kind of thing where you're telling them this is going to be your best course of action if these are the goals you want to achieve then.
That, and also being able to forecast what it looks like if you don't. So one of the most important roles, and I kind of touched on it a minute ago, but didn't elaborate on it too much, was being able to determine what the outcome of making a decision will be before you have to make the decision. So having those contingencies in place, it takes a lot of time and a lot of expertise and coordination of those different components, but that's probably the most important thing is if I make this decision now, how is this going to impact everything 1, 3, 5, 10 years, or even 6 weeks? So we can forecast and extrapolate that data, and that becomes the most important.
The next position I'd like to talk about is the offensive line, which I believe you said earlier was the insurance or like a protection kind of thing for the business. So who are they, and basically what would their role be in the business?
I love the offensive line. So I played offensive line. It's the most lackluster position you could ever imagine. Nobody pays attention to them. The only person that loves them is the coach and the quarterback. Yep. So because at the end of the day, they are the most important line of defense that you have. Whether it's commercial insurance, protecting somebody from a slip and fall on your property, if you own rental properties, protecting that source of income, or if it's life insurance. We work in life insurance as a necessary component. No one likes talking about it, but at the end of the day, if something happened to you, it's absolutely imperative. So it protects that quarterback and all those different components on the team and enables them to do what they need to do. And without it, the ball's just not going to move.
Okay.
So
based on what business you are and what position you are, like if you're a trucking company or if you're a boutique shop, would you have different people be in your offensive line and provide different kinds of insurance then?
Absolutely. So and as a whole, that's one of the things that a CPA and a financial planner, or your quarterback and your coach, really need to be able to take into account. The whole field of vision or a view or wherever you're playing, whether it's a dome or an outside stadium, to stick with the analogy, is different for every business owner. So if you are a boutique firm, to your example, or a trucking company, dealing with those different components, you may have a tied in that serves as a fleet, an auto broker. So you may have a large insurance policy that's just a general umbrella policy if you're a boutique firm. You just need something that's general coverage, but also need some life insurance in the event that something happens to you, or a buy-sell agreement. And the more advanced everything gets, the more you really build up that position. So if you really want to become fluent in the run game, so as if for football purposes, you're running a triple option, you need to have the ability to have a pulling guard. So you have a blindside tackle. So those different components really come into play. I didn't know this, but did you know the blindside tackle is one of the highest compensated players on a team? So if your quarterback is right-handed and he drops back, and oddly enough, I actually found this out from the movie The Blind Side. So it's kind of, who says you can't learn anything from watching a movie? So, but if your quarterback's right-handed and they drop back, the one thing that would be the most devastating is for him to take something from the left side, take a defensive end or a linebacker hit to the spine from the left side. So that player right there, who's constantly overlooked, nobody even thinks about it, but they're one of the most highly compensated players on a team for a reason. So that was kind of off on a tangent, but those different components, everything advances the more complicated the situation. So if a business owner, let's say it's a single business owner, they need a very basic type of insurance or amount of insurance. If you're dealing with a partnership, or you have a multifaceted company, or you have, let's say, a professional service corporation, which we deal with a lot, you're going to have multiple lines of insurance provided by multiple different people, multiple different professionals. And most of the time, using one person for all of those it can be dangerous.
Have you seen with clients that you work with, or maybe personally, that people try and find the wrong insurance people, or they're looking in the wrong place to try and find what they need?
I see most of the time people try to put, a lot of business owners try to put the cart before the horse. And what I mean by that is that they will go directly to an insurance person as opposed to starting where they need to start. So there is a sequence of getting professionals that you will be exponentially better off if you follow this sequence. 1, you need to have a CPA. 2, you got to have a financial planner. 3, you got to have an attorney. So if you do those out of order, and then kind of the insurance agents, they will build out that team with you. So if you look at yourself as the business owner and the owner of the team, you sign the checks. So you're going to have the ultimate decision. That's important. So, but you need to listen to the counsel of your head coach, your quarterback. Who do they want to play with? So, I mean, that's the best way of visualizing it, is that if you have a wide receiver that doesn't get along with any member of the team, or they won't coordinate, that person is probably not a good fit for that team. So in the Spurs, so we're listening locally where everybody's a Spurs fan. That was for the longest time, it still really is, geared with Popovich and a team of not just mind-blowing stars. They weren't all just tier 1 stars, but they played so well together that they were fundamentally flawless. So having those professionals be able to coordinate and using those first 3 that I mentioned, the CPA, the financial planner, and the attorney, to build that team of people they like working with, that's a proper sequence. So, and I don't know if that really answered the question. Sorry. But
that's good. So out of curiosity, what position on the offensive line did you play?
I was a right tackle.
Okay.
So, and a right guard, depending on where we were going. So if we were going far out, I had to move my feet. But coach said that coach always told me, he goes, you better learn to love to hit people because you're not outrunning anybody. So I didn't have the quick feet aspect of it.
Okay. And then going with the attorney that you're saying that you want to help build and establish the business with you, what position or what kind of situation would you need an attorney for? I know you mentioned in the previous podcast that you want them as like a last-ditch effort, or if you're at the end zone, for example, you want them to punch it in to either score a 2-point conversion or the touchdown itself. So what would you need for that?
They're important. Attorneys have a tendency to identify what formation you're going to use too. Going back to the football again too. Is a power eye going to be good? Is a wishbone going to be good? So they're going to figure out how much defense you need as far as a quarterback. So what is the offensive line going to look like? If we go with a goal line offense and we need to punch it in, we're going to line up everybody. We're not going to have somebody wide out. We're not going to have a real estate broker, all this. We're making a strong push to be able to focus on this business. We need to beef up the line. So we need to have as much insurance as possible and create the proper type of entity or formation that we need. So most of the time you're going to see an attorney recommend multiple entities. So, and the financial planner and the accountant need to say, okay, well, we have this, this, and this that can flow through in this way. And then the attorney will say, well, that won't work with this piece, so what if we try this? So it's a constant adaptation. And you'll see football teams change formation, like you mentioned earlier, at halftime. If something's not working, they're going to change it. So being able to go to that attorney and say, something's not working here, we need to be able to plan for X, Y, and Z happening in the next 3 to 5 years. That's something that they need to be aware of.
Okay. And then as well as the tailback, you want them to be flexible. Would you want multiple attorneys, basically, depending on what their specialty is as well? Sure.
Most of the time, if you have, let's say that a common example that we see is we have an owner, someone who owns a business owner that also owns a piece of real estate that they rent back to their business. or a professional that also has rental real estate. So at that point, you're going to want an attorney that's familiar with family law because you have estate planning issues. You're also going to want somebody who's familiar with tax law, which is a completely different animal. And you're also going to want somebody who's knowledgeable about corporate litigation. So in the event that they have to defend you for any reason, then they're there. So
Okay.
you could have any multitude depending upon what the situation is and what the business owner's situation is. You could have 4 tailbacks and 7 receivers and no linemen. Who knows? So everything needs to be able to change.
Okay.
So using general rules of thumb can be very dangerous. So if you only use one attorney or one CPA or one financial planner, that's suitable, but you got to be able to take that into consideration when looking at it.
Oh, certainly, yeah. So in the last podcast, we were going over all the different positions, and you didn't really highlight a wide receiver or a tight end. Would you say that they're like a specialty kind of thing, since you don't really see them being at a team very often? We have the whole thing going on right now with Antonio Brown on the Steelers. Would they be a specialty thing, like an expert in one field that you would need for just like one instance, basically?
Absolutely. You just rarely see a franchise team be built around a wide receiver or a tight end. So I've worked in with several clients, professionals from different backgrounds, from business brokers to farmers and ranchers, art brokers, coin or precious metals dealers, gun brokers, classic auto brokers, or you used a trucking company. So you're going to buy from an auto broker or a large-scale broker that can sell fleets and portfolios of trucks. So those different components will come into play at different times, and just they'll be additions to almost like a bolt-on of the general core of what your team looks like.
Okay, so then they're not a crucial or extremely important part of the team, but we can't just dismiss them and say they're useless. They play their role, but they're not the star of the show in this example then.
Absolutely. And if you have different things out of state, those out of state professionals need to be consulted, because if you have multiple lines of business that operate outside of the state of Texas, then you don't just need an attorney that operates in Texas. You don't need just an accountant that operates in Texas. So you need somebody that operates in whatever state that is. So, and you don't have to you just have to know who the person is if you do have a problem, because then the coach and the quarterback can call and say, hey, are we going to have any issue with this with you? So, and if you imagine just that board of trustees or board of directors for your company doing that, run it by them.
Okay. And I know we talked about this last time as well, but I'd like for you to please go ahead in depth again with the tailback, just so we can finish off the whole list of people that we've discussed before, please.
Sure. So the tailback being the banker, the lender?
Yes.
Oh, this is it's such a hard definition to make for a bank or a lender for a tailback, because they serve so many different roles. So banks are usually, and lenders are usually, the most important piece of the access to capital and being able to provide different things like SBA loans and provide the ability for a business owner to operate in the short term and the long term. So do we want to expend a large amount of capital to be able to buy this piece of equipment that we need to do our business, or does it make more sense to finance it at a lower interest rate to keep our cash flow? And you'll have a lot of different professionals say that we don't do anything with debt. We recommend paying off all the debt. Well, that's great, but at the same time, if we liquidate every dollar that we have for a piece of equipment that we absolutely need to do our job, and then we run short on cash flow, a lot of times things aren't as black and white as you want them to be. So I would say that the tailback allows that level of flexibility. They're almost like a cushion or kind of a fail-safe.
Okay.
So if your quarterback's moving down the line and they see that somebody got through the line off the right tackle, that used to be me, if I miss my block, that tailback's going to be right behind them. So if you look in terms of a triple option or an option play where that quarterback has the ability to dump that ball off and still save the play and save himself from getting his head ripped off. So it's important on so many different levels that it's really hard to just identify a couple, because those banks are also going to provide liquidity, which is one of the most important aspects to business. So is liquidity and the ability to make changes that you need to make whenever you need to make them.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate you coming in and speaking with us about basically everything that you know regarding the creating a team to help make a business successful. How can people get a hold of you if they need help regarding financial or anything else like that?
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me. We operate in a facilitative role. So our job is to connect different professionals. We rely on our CPAs that we work with, especially David Plemons offers so many different services to his clients that when he needs something, he comes to us. So if you want to get to me, come and talk to David or call the office and let them know that you have a specific problem that you're facing. And if David can't handle it, he knows the proper professional that he will reach out to handle it.
Thank you for joining us today. If you would like more information about our guests, Chris Hall and Josh Vasquez, you can email us at admin@PlemonsCPA.com. Join us next week for another episode of Let's Talk about the hustle, juggle, and struggle of small business. Chat soon. Thank you.